Hi everyone, welcome back to the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. I'm GoLocal News Editor Kate Nagel. It's been a packed day here in studio. We appreciate your tuning in. I would like to welcome my final guest, our regular, saving the best for last.
Final forever?
Bob Whitcomb, I appreciate your coming into the studio.
Talk to my friend Maria, that's good.
I did, so talk with us a little bit. This was the previous guest, Maria Karagiannis, former Globe reporter, spent some time over on the island of Lesbos.
Right.
Where all of the refugees basically came as an entry point into Europe, got into a refugee camp, which basically most journalists don't have the ability to. We're going to be talking about this tonight. So how did you get her at the PCFR?
We just sent
Called
a
her?
message. We threatened to slash her tires.
You said you wanted her to
We
come.
generally found physical threats work best.
So she's talking tonight, and she raised a good point. There had been so much attention placed, especially in Greece, those sort of entry points where the refugees were flooding into.
Millions of people fleeing
people.
Syria. Yeah, Syria probably has half the population it had before the Civil War. Just a catastrophe. Yeah.
And she talked about where things currently stand, and she said, made a really good point, this sort of lack of now international attention. She said the refugees are almost imprisoned, if you will, because they're not letting them leave off of the island.
That's right. The Europeans have pushed back. And Angela Merkel, the Chancellor of Germany, certainly let many in, but there's been a big pushback the last few months. In some European nations, especially Hungary, I think to some extent, certainly Czechoslovakia, Hungary, maybe Austria a little bit, are very troubled by all these immigrants coming in.
And it'll be interesting, she mentioned, I didn't realize this, the citizens of Lesbos are up for a Nobel Peace Prize.
That's right, yeah, I don't know, I suppose they could do that. The Nobel Committee, the Norwegians can do whatever they want, but I guess there is a proposal to give the entire population of Lesbos a Nobel Prize. Yeah.
But did you hear her comment? They said, we don't want it. They want people to come back and visit because tourism was 90% of the country.
Disastrous, and sort of somewhat ironically, a lot of the tourism was from Europe. From Germany and the Scandinavian countries and so on. By the way, Lesbos, that's the origin of the word lesbian. I don't think you went into that.
a little etymology for you here.
Yeah, a little etymology. Run away with it.
So talk about islands. We had power outage here. We're continuing to see Puerto Rico. Is Puerto Rico going to recover?
I think it's going to take maybe perhaps a decade. I think what would help them the most, and I think in the fullness of time it will happen, they should become a state. They still are not getting the kind of attention that a state would get, even though they are technically part of the United States. You have to keep in mind, I don't think President Trump realized this, they're citizens. And I think, if they were real states, 51st state, then they would get better attention. The other problem they have, of course, it's mountainous. You've ever flown over there? Very, very mountainous, which makes it a lot more difficult. Much tougher than, say, Houston or South Florida, with flat as a pancake.
For the recovery efforts.
For the recovery
You see the mountains,
efforts,
you see the big towers for electricity just toppled. I mean, just in and of itself, it's not flipping a switch. It's, as you said, going to take time.
That's right, yeah.
Speaking of time.
Massive, yeah.
Speaking of time, it's hard to believe, it's been a week since the shooting that took place on 95. We went to the press conference on that Friday to find out the Providence Police's position on it. I mean, as sort of the dust is settled, sort of, if you will.
A bit. We still don't know fully what happened, and and I'm still trying to piece it through. I wonder if we shouldn't get somebody from. I've talked about this with your colleague. Somebody from out of state take a look at it. Maybe the Attorney General here should look at it as a former police officer. Just an idea. The thing I pull from that, I still don't know what kind of coordination there really was between the province and state police. I think it's important to know that. And then another thing I mentioned last week, which I've noticed in all the cities I've worked, just to take note of it, police hate two things in particular. They hate their guns being stolen, and they hate their cars being stolen. And this can cause a incendiary reaction. The third thing, which is sort of general and kind of glib, but I think it bears saying, all three of these people involved in this thing, it's sad. Drug addicted, ravaged, the underbelly of America. Just very sad. People who can't function. And, to various degrees, drugs are about all of this stuff. And very, very sad, I think. So I suppose we'll need some sort of informal commission, maybe not a full commission, but some study to look at this thing. I would pick maybe a state police, or perhaps a retired state police person from the state, take a look.
And you mentioned the out-of-state standpoint. I mean, they
Yeah,
do say that
yeah.
the state police is doing, it's, I think,
Yeah.
very difficult in this to do
Very
their own,
difficult. I'm
and to do your own
sympathetic.
investigation.
But these things
though.
are happening like that. You know, these things, you're making these split second decisions. In this case, of course, all more hair raising because it's along Route 95, basically, which is extraordinary, to say the least. And it's sort of semi-amazing that no one else is hurt or killed other than the people right into their car in which they, how many rounds? Was it 40 or something?
I think the total number is
There's
43.
some debate about
Yeah.
that, but I mean that's a lot of firepower.
That is indeed. So that was just last
Yeah.
week. One of the things we heard this week, GE announcing
Yeah.
some major cuts across the board. They are continuing to
Yep.
struggle. Potential for impact here in Providence, as they're talking about job cuts in Providence.
Yeah, maybe. My guess is not immediately. This is small potatoes here. Maybe the governor is now happy that they didn't announce they're moving in 5,000 jobs and then lay off 5,000 people.
Well, we are
As we
down.
said on this show, promises in the corporate world are good for about 15 seconds. They're hired, they're fired. But the thing was here, I think 100 people over at the old Providence Journal building, I believe.
There's only 50 something at this point.
Only 50? Yeah, well, you raise an issue. Will it get up to 100?
Yes.
Or will it go down to 2? Who knows? But I think that's pretty small beer.
So what's the cheat sheet? What do we expect
Well,
this
I'm going
weekend?
to talk about one of the interesting things the tax bill could really, on Capitol Hill could really affect New England would be taxing college endowments, the 1.4% of the income thrown out by the big endowments. As you might be aware, New England is famous for having schools with very big endowments.
Yes.
Very big endowments. So this could hurt some of them a little bit. I think that's interesting. And certainly there's a lot of waste in these colleges, climbing walls, spas, the astronomical salaries of the executives of these places, too many deans and all that. But still, the bulk of the money goes to keeping the roof on and, financial aid. And that the richest places are all need blind.
Yep.
For scholarship. I don't think in New England there's probably MIT, Dartmouth College, Harvard, Yale, maybe Brown need blind, maybe. We're close to it.
But it raises an interesting point, again, taxing the endowments, and we already
Yeah.
see the pushback
Yeah.
time and time again with the tax exempt properties in the
Right.
city proper.
Yeah.
So, paying off Peter to pay Paul.
Yeah, now how does this work?
Because-
52% or something of the property is
There's
with the latest percentage is
nonprofit property.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
if you have an endowment and, Brown sits at the negotiating table with
yeah.
the city of Providence, are they gonna, have their hands out and say, but we're so poor, we.
Poor lambkins. Our
We're so-
endowment's only 3.6 billion.
Endowments being
Yeah.
taxed, we can't possibly, so, I mean.
And then you see the salaries of some of the administrators, certainly not a lot of the professors,
Law
but
of unintended
huge salaries.
consequences.
Provosts at a lot of these Ivy League colleges are getting many hundreds of thousands of dollars a year.
Yeah.
The provost is crucial. They're really the people who run the place. The president's up there.
Just raising money.
Bush is raising money.
Raising
They're
money.
never there. They're never there. Yeah.
Okay, so what else is on the cheat sheet?
Well, so what else? I talk about, there's a very interesting, a couple of interesting things. One is the tree program, which is written about at EcoRI, which you people have an affiliation with. The Providence tree planting thing, which is great, so I tout that. We got a tree from them 25 years ago. It was about that high. You can't see it. 5 feet. It's 5 feet high. It's not 20 feet high.
Wow.
A great place for birds.
Trees are very,
Yeah. Oh,
you can't,
Clean air, warms you in the winter, cools you in the summer, reduces pollution, and raises property values.
just from an aesthetic standpoint.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For the beauty. Just
So you're pro
raises-
trees?
Yeah.
And finally, what else?
And then there's actually a lot of interesting things going on now. There's an underwater training, underwater vehicle training program, which I may have talked about before. A collaboration of URI, UConn, that's getting going. And there's a very interesting experiment with tidal power in Cape Cod, the end of Cape Cod Canal, with this huge current. Don't fall in there. Don't jump off the railroad.
I don't think I
bridge
knew that,
there.
yeah.
Yeah, and
Big
they're
current,
going to try to see if they can generate a lot of electricity with that. And I think people up and down the New England coast are watching that. The other thing is I don't like Thanksgiving because it comes in the afternoon. It makes you feel heavy and logy. It would be better if we had Atlantic time, you know, the Maritimes. That way you'd have more sunlight in the afternoon, Thanksgiving afternoon. And November is a downer.
So you're not,
it's the most cloudy month. Do you know that?
It's the most cloudy month. So you're not anti-Thanksgiving dinner, you're anti
Right.
it getting dark early in conjunction with Thanksgiving.
Yeah, well, I'm actually anti-Thanksgiving. I'm in favor of feast, but not of Thanksgiving.
What about Thanksgiving brunch? What if you just move it back a little bit earlier?
Oh, it help a little bit.
Yeah,
No,
but
I
then
write
you
about
could
my
do turkey.
grandfather, and I write about bogus family names.
What bogus family names?
Well, like, there was a tradition in my family. We were related to Daniel Webster, you know, the great orator, kind of a crook, because we had an ancestor called Daniel Webster Butler. But I finally did some research.
Not related.
The reason I did research is when I was a little kid, we ate this place called the Daniel Webster Inn and Sandwich on Cape Cod. So everybody around the table was, oh, we're descended from him. They're totally bogus. It was more like, you know, Woodrow Wilson Jones or Franklin Roosevelt. It was because when this guy, Daniel Webster Butler, was born in 1838, Daniel Webster was probably one of the 2 or 3 most famous people in the country. So another lie, another family mythologies, which are thick. We all have them. So I also talk about my grandfather, who was a laconic character, and him presiding over this Thanksgiving, he couldn't wait to get back home and light up a Parliament and finish his crossword puzzle while he looked over the light from the freighters of Buzzards Bay. So anyway, it's just, and then 2 books, one by Dr. William Mason, which is a tour of his great estates and gardens in New England, guidebook, which is a lot of fun, and one by another physician you may have heard of, Ed Iannicelli, used to run Rhode Island Hospital, more memoirs of growing up in Federal
Hill.
And other places in the province. Very charming. So 2 very charming books by distinguished local physicians.
Fantastic. Look forward, as always, to reading the column. And look forward to having you back in next week. I know you have a talk to go to.
See you later,
Okay,
alligator.
okay, we'll let you go.
Bye, everybody.